I still have the map. It's rotting now, falling apart at the creases, taped together with yellowing Scotch tape I put on it back in the 70s. But I keep it. It shows a line drawn in grease pencil right across a river that wasn't supposed to be crossed yet. That blue line represents the Rhine. And that grease pencil mark? That was the exact moment I realized that this war wasn't just about shooting Germans. It was about egos. Massive, crushing egos that were willing to spend our lives like loose change to prove a point. It was March 1945. The mud in the Palatinate wasn't like the mud in France. In France, the mud felt like it was trying to hold you back. In Germany, the mud felt like it was trying to swallow you whole. It was cold, that damp, bone-aching cold that settles into your joints and stays there for 50 years. I was 20 years old, a private first class in the 3rd Army under General Patton. We called him Old Blood and Guts. They said it was his guts and our blood, and most days, that felt about right. We had been pushing hard. The momentum was terrifying. You have to understand, usually in war, there's a rhythm. You take a hill, you wait for supplies, you dig in, you sleep, you move again. But in March of 45, Patton had the bit in his teeth. We were moving so fast that half the time the mess trucks couldn't find us. We were living on K rations that tasted like sawdust and wax, and we were sleeping in shifts on the back of deuce-and-a-half trucks bouncing over cratered roads. The rumor mill in the infantry is faster than any radio. We heard things. We heard that up north, the British Field Marshal Montgomery was preparing this massive production, a grand crossing of the Rhine. We heard he had thousands of guns, tens of thousands of men, specialized boats, smokescreens, the whole 9 yards. He was planning it like a coronation. He wanted to be the hero who led the Allies into the heart of Germany. And then there was us, the stepchildren down south. I remember the night vividly. We were halted near a vineyard, the vines all dead and twisted like skeleton fingers reaching out of the gray earth. My sergeant, a guy named Miller from Ohio, came walking down the line. Miller was a good man. He didn't yell unless he had to. He looked tired. We all looked tired. Our eyes were sunk deep in our heads, dark circles like bruises. "Tighten up," Miller said, his voice low. "We're moving out in 10. "Moving where, Sarge?" I asked, scraping mud off my boot with a stick. "We just got here." "East," he said. "Always east, Lawson. We're going to the river." "The Rhine?" "That's the one." "I thought Monty had the ticket for that show," another guy, Henderson, piped up. Henderson was a skinny kid from Brooklyn who always seemed to know everything about everything. I heard Eisenhower told Patton to hold his horses so Monty could get the glory. Miller just spat on the ground. "Does Patton look like the kind of man who holds his horses? Grab your gear." We marched. That night was a blur of shadows and the smell of diesel exhaust. We were moving towards Oppenheim. We didn't know it then, but we were part of a secret race. Patton wasn't going to let Montgomery have the headlines. He wanted to sneak across the Rhine before the British could launch their big parade. And we were the ones who had to do the sneaking. It feels strange telling you this now. For years, I didn't talk about the politics of it. I just talked about the cold and the fear. But looking back, you see the strings. You see how the decisions made in heated tents by men with stars on their shoulders trickled down to us, shivering in the dark. We arrived near the riverbank well after midnight. The silence was heavy. Usually when you approach a major obstacle like the Rhine, there's an artillery barrage, there's noise, there's chaos. But this was quiet, too quiet. It felt wrong. It felt like we were breaking the rules, not just of the army, but of common sense. I was positioned near a low stone wall, watching the water. It was black, moving fast, churning. A massive natural barrier that had protected the heart of Germany for centuries. And we were supposed to just cross it? Without the air support? Without the massive bombardment? A jeep rolled up quietly, lights off. A few officers got out. I couldn't see their faces, but I saw the silhouette of a helmet with a distinct shape and the glint of something on the collar. It wasn't Patton, but it was high brass. They were whispering, pointing at the water. They were looking at the far bank like hungry wolves. I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Miller. "Lawson, you and Henderson, you're on the first boat." My stomach dropped. "Boat? What boat, Sarge? I don't see any engineers." "They're bringing them up now. Assault boats. Paddle power. Silent crossing." Silent. Crossing the Rhine. Silent. It sounded like suicide. If the Germans were awake on the other side, if they had even one machine gun nest properly sighted, we were dead men. Sitting ducks in plywood boats. I looked at Henderson. He was shaking. Not big shakes, just a fine vibration like a tuning fork. I guess I was doing the same. We checked our rifles, I checked my grenades, I touched the letter in my pocket, the one from my mother I hadn't opened yet because I was saving it for a quiet moment that never seemed to come. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. It helps me know there are still people out there who care about what happened to us boys back then. We carried the boats down to the mud. They were heavy, awkward things. The water lapped at our boots, freezing cold. I remember thinking about how strange it was. Up north, Montgomery was probably sleeping in a warm trailer, dreaming of his victory speech. Here, we were sliding into the icy Rhine, hoping the moon stayed behind the clouds. We pushed off. The paddles dipped into the water with soft plips. The current grabbed us immediately, trying to spin us downstream. We had to fight it, digging in hard. My shoulders burned. I kept my eyes on the far bank. It was just a wall of black trees. Every shape looked like a bunker. Every rustle of the wind sounded like a bolt racking back. Halfway across. That's the worst part. You're too far to swim back and too far to rush the shore. You're in the void. I held my breath. I think we all did. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the men and the rush of the river. Then the keel scraped gravel. We were there. We piled out, falling into the shallow water, scrambling up the slick bank. We hit the dirt, weapons up, waiting for the muzzle flash. Waiting for the scream of fire. Nothing. Just the wind in the trees. We had caught them sleeping. Patton had done it. We had crossed the Rhine without firing a shot. It felt miraculous and terrifying at the same time because now we were on their side. We were in Germany proper. There was no going back. We secured a small perimeter. More boats were coming. I could hear them now, faint splashes in the dark. We moved up toward a road that ran parallel to the river. That's when we saw the headlights. A German truck driving with blackout lights, just a slit of illumination. He had no idea we were there. Why would he? The Americans were supposed to be miles back. The big attack was supposed to be in the north. Miller signaled us. We waited until the truck was right on top of us. We stepped out. The driver slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. We had him surrounded before he could even reach for the door handle. He was an old man, probably in his 60s, wearing a uniform that was too big for him. He looked at us like we were Martians. He couldn't process it. Americans? Here? Tonight? We took him prisoner. He was shaking so hard his teeth were clacking. Miller offered him a cigarette. The old man took it with trembling fingers. By dawn, the bridgehead was established, and that's when the circus started. The engineers were building a pontoon bridge at a speed I had never seen before. Tanks were starting to roll across on barges. And then, later that morning, came the moment that ties this whole thing together. I was digging a foxhole. You always dig, no matter how tired you are, when a group of vehicles came across the newly finished pontoon bridge. It wasn't just Americans. There was a French liaison officer with them, a captain, wearing that distinct kepi cap. We were near the road, taking a break, eating some cold hash. The convoy stopped near us because a tank had thrown a track and blocked the exit for a moment. The French officer got out to stretch his legs. He walked over to where we were sitting. He looked elegant, even in the mud. He had a scarf around his neck. He looked at me, then at the river, then back at me. "You crossed last night?" he asked. His English was perfect, just a slight clip to it. "Yes, sir," I said, standing up. "Fast," he said. He was smiling. Not a polite smile, but a real, amused grin. "Very fast. Does Field Marshal Montgomery know you are here?" I didn't know how to answer that. "I just go where they tell me, sir." He laughed. He took out a silver cigarette case and offered me one. I took it. It was real tobacco, not the dry stuff we had. "General Patton," the Frenchman said, lighting his cigarette and looking at the chaotic, beautiful mess of the American army pouring across the river. "He has, how do you say, stolen the thunder. The British are still arranging their teacups north of the Ruhr, and you are here, pissing in the Rhine." He used that word, pissing. It shocked me, coming from an officer. "De Gaulle will enjoy this," he said, almost to himself. He observes everything, you know. He observes that while the British demand perfection, the Americans simply demand results. It is chaotic, but effective. He looked at me with a strange intensity. "Do you know why this matters, soldier?" "No, sir," I said honestly. "I just want to get this over with and go home." "It matters," he said, blowing smoke into the gray morning air, "because it shows that the balance of power has shifted. The British think they are the brains of this alliance, but today, here, The brains are sleeping, and the muscle has kicked down the door. My General de Gaulle, he worries about the American giant. He thinks you are too wild. But today, I think he will be happy to see the British embarrassed. It is a petty thing, perhaps. But in war, petty things become history. That conversation stuck with me. I didn't fully understand it at the time. I was just a grunt. But looking back, I see it. I see that even as we were fighting for our lives, the men at the top were playing a game of chess where we were just pawns. Montgomery wanted the glory of the crossing to secure Britain's place at the peace table. Patton wanted the crossing to prove the American army was superior. And de Gaulle, he was watching from the sidelines, taking notes, realizing that the future of Europe wasn't going to be dictated by London anymore. It was going to be dictated by Washington, and by wild men like Patton. The tank track got fixed. The French officer flicked his cigarette into a puddle, gave me a quick salute, and got back in his jeep. As he drove away, I saw him laughing. We moved out an hour later. We pushed deep into Germany. The resistance started to stiffen. The surprise wore off, and the reality of fighting in the enemy's backyard set in. A few days later, we were in a town. I forget the name now. They all blur together. Small German towns with timber-framed houses and cobblestone streets. We were clearing it house by house. It's the worst kind of fighting. You don't know what's behind the next door. A terrified family? A kid with a Panzerfaust? An SS unit that refuses to surrender? We came up to a two-story house on the edge of the square. The windows were blown out. Miller signaled for me and Henderson to take the back. We crept through the garden, stepping over debris. I kicked open the back door. The kitchen was empty. A pot of something was still on the stove, cold now. We moved into the hallway. I heard a noise upstairs, a creak of floorboards. I looked at Henderson. He nodded. We went up the stairs, slow, careful. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought the enemy could hear it. At the top of the stairs, there was a closed door. I reached for the handle, turned it, and kicked it open, swinging my rifle into the room. "Hand hoch!" I screamed. There was a German soldier there, but he wasn't standing. He was sitting in a chair by the window, his tunic unbuttoned. He had a bandage around his head, soaked through with dark blood. His rifle was leaning against the wall, out of reach. He looked at me with eyes that were completely empty. He didn't raise his hands. He just stared. I kept my rifle aimed at his chest. "Get up!" I yelled. He didn't move. He just pointed a shaky finger at the table beside him. There was a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. One glass was full, the other was empty. "Please," he said in broken English. "Please, drink." It was a trap. It had to be. I checked the corners of the room. Clear. Just him. "Henderson, cover him," I said. I walked over to the soldier. I kicked his rifle away across the floor. He didn't react. I looked at the wine. "What is this?" I asked. "My birthday," he said softly. "Today, 22. He was 22, 2 years older than me. He looked 40. "I am finished," he said. "My unit, gone. Everyone gone. I wait for you." I looked at Henderson. He lowered his rifle slightly. The tension in the room shifted. It went from a killing floor to something else, something sadder. "You're a prisoner of war," I told him. "Stand up." "One drink," he begged. "For birthday." I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the conversation with the French officer earlier, the realization that everything was just a game to the big shots. Maybe I was just sick of the killing. I looked at the door. No sign of Miller yet. I reached out and took the full glass of wine. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. It helps keep the history alive for the next generation. I took the glass. The German soldier smiled. It was a weak, pathetic smile, but it was human. He poured a splash into the empty glass for himself. He could barely lift the bottle. "To survival," he whispered. I didn't toast him. I just drank the wine. It was sour, cheap stuff, but it cut through the dust in my throat. I set the glass down. "Now get up," I said, hardening my voice again. "War's over for you." He stood up, swaying. We marched him down the stairs and out to the street. Miller was there with the rest of the squad. He saw the German. "Got one?" Miller asked. "Yeah, gave up without a fight," I said. I didn't mention the wine. I didn't mention the birthday. We handed him over to the MPs. As they loaded him onto a truck, he looked back at me. He gave a small nod. I nodded back. I never saw him again. I don't know if he survived the camps. I don't know if he went home to rebuild his country. But in that moment, in that wrecked house, we had a momentary truce. a recognition that we were both just caught in the gears of a machine much bigger than us. The campaign rolled on. We heard later about the official crossing of the Rhine by Montgomery. We heard about the massive bombardment, the speeches, the press coverage. Winston Churchill even went across and pissed in the river, just to say he did. But we knew the truth. We knew the Third Army had been there days before. We knew we had broken the back of the defense while the others were still rehearsing. But that speed came at a cost. We were outrunning our supply lines constantly. We were running out of gas, running out of ammo, and we were seeing things that scarred us permanently. April came. The weather improved slightly, but the smell of death got worse. We were moving into the heart of the Reich now. The fanaticism of the enemy increased. We weren't fighting the regular army as much anymore. We were fighting kids and old men who had been brainwashed to believe we were monsters. I remember a specific ambush near a town called Gotha. We were moving through a wooded area, pine trees, thick and dark. It was quiet. The birds were singing. It's always the birds that get you. They don't know there's a war on. The first shot took out the guy walking point, a new replacement named Stevens. He hadn't been with us 3 days. He dropped like a sack of cement. Then the woods exploded. Machine gun fire from both sides. We hit the dirt, scrambling for cover behind the trees. I was pinned down behind a thick oak. I could hear the bullets chewing up the bark inches from my face. I could hear Stevens screaming out in the open, "Medic! Medic!" But the medic couldn't get to him. The fire was too intense. I looked around. Henderson was to my left, behind a fallen log. Miller was yelling orders, trying to get the bar gunner to suppress the enemy position. "Lawson, flank left! Take Henderson!" Miller screamed over the roar of the guns. I signaled Henderson. We started to crawl, elbows and knees digging into the pine needles. We moved low, trying to get around the side of the machine gun nest. We got to a shallow ravine and dropped in. We could move faster here. We ran, lungs burning, until we were roughly parallel to where the fire was coming from. We crept up the side of the ravine. I peeked over. I saw the nest. It was a dugout position, camouflaged with branches. 2 men, one on the gun, one feeding the belt. They were focused on the main trail, pouring fire into my friends. I unclipped a grenade. I pulled the pin. I looked at Henderson. He did the same. We counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. We lobbed the grenades. They sailed through the air, dark little eggs of destruction. One landed right on the edge of their hole. The other rolled in. The explosion shook the ground. The machine gun stopped abruptly. We rushed the position, rifles ready, but there was no need. It was done. I looked down into the hole. It wasn't men, it was boys. They couldn't have been more than 16. They were wearing SS camouflage smocks that were too big for them. One of them was still moving slightly, a terrible jerky motion. Then he stopped. I felt sick. I turned away and threw up on the pine needles. Stevens died before the medic could get to him. We lost 2 other guys that day. For what? For a patch of woods that didn't matter? Because Patton wanted to keep moving? Because Montgomery wanted to catch up? That night I couldn't sleep. I sat cleaning my rifle over and over again. Miller came by and sat next to me. "You did good today, Lawson," he said. "They were kids, Sarge," I said. "Just kids." "They had a machine gun," Miller said flatly. "A machine gun doesn't care how old the finger on the trigger is. It kills just the same. You saved the squad. Remember that." I tried to remember that, but all I could see were those oversized smocks. We kept moving. We liberated towns where the people hung white sheets from the windows. We found warehouses full of stolen art. We found people who looked like skeletons, walking along the roads, trying to get home to places that didn't exist anymore. And then we found the camps. I won't tell you which one. It doesn't matter. They were all hell. But that was the moment the politics disappeared completely. When we walked through those gates, when we saw what had been happening while the generals argued about bridgeheads and glory, everything else fell away. I remember standing by a fence looking at a pile of shoes. Just shoes. Thousands of them. Children's shoes, work boots, fancy heels. Patton came to the camp. I saw him. He didn't look like the strutting peacock then. He looked sick. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He ordered the townspeople from the nearby village to come and see it, to walk through and look at what they had allowed to happen. I stood guard while they walked through. Some of them cried, some of them fainted. Some of them just looked at the ground, refusing to see. That was the end of the war for me, really. The fighting continued for a few more weeks, but the spirit of it changed. We weren't racing anymore. We were just cleaning up a nightmare. When VE Day finally came, we were in Austria. We heard it on the radio. The Germans had surrendered. It was over. There was no cheering, no throwing helmets in the air like in the movies. We just sat there. Someone opened a bottle of cognac they had been saving. We passed it around. I thought about the map. I thought about the Rhine. I thought about the French officer and his laugh. I thought about the German boy with the wine on his birthday. I thought about the kids in the machine gun nest. I realized that de Gaulle was right, in a way. He observed that the Americans were a force of nature, chaotic and overwhelming, but he also saw that we were naive. We thought we could fix the world with speed and firepower. We didn't understand the deep rotting sickness that had taken hold of Europe. We had to learn that the hard way. I came home in late 45. I went back to work at my dad's hardware store. I got married. I had kids. I lived a whole life. But I still have that map. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I take it out. I trace that grease pencil line across the Rhine. And I remember the cold water. I remember the fear. And I remember the lesson I learned on that riverbank. History is written by the generals, by the Churchills and the Eisenhowers and the de Gaulles. They write about strategy and alliances and bold moves. But history is paid for by the guys named Miller and Henderson and Stevens. It's paid for by 19-year-olds shivering in a plywood boat, wondering if they'll ever see the sun rise again. I'm 92 years old now. My time is coming to an end. I'm not afraid of it. I've seen death before. I've looked it in the eye. I just wanted to tell you this story because I don't want it to be just a line in a history book. I want you to know what it felt like. I want you to know that we were scared. I want you to know that we were human. If you've listened this far, thank you. You've given an old soldier the best gift you can give, your time and your attention. The wars change, the weapons change, the politics change, but the mud remains the same. The cold remains the same, and the feeling of losing a friend, that never changes. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. This is Henry Lawson signing off. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I have more stories to tell if you want to hear them. There's the story about the time we found a hidden cellar of champagne in Rhine, or the time I almost got court-martialed for sleeping on guard duty. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to hear next. I told you about the river, the Rhine. That was the end, the finish line. But you can't understand the relief of seeing that open water until you understand where we came from before that. You can't understand the light until you've been in the dark. And for us, the dark had a name. It was the Huertgen Forest. If you ask any GI who served in the 1st Army or the 3rd Army about the Green Hell, they'll go quiet. It wasn't a battle like the others. It wasn't taking a town or crossing a field. It was a meat grinder. It was 50 square miles of dense, rotting pine trees, hills so steep you had to crawl up them, and mud that acted like quicksand. This was November of 1944, before the snows of the Bulge. It was just cold rain. Constant freezing rain that turned everything gray. The trees were planted so close together that even at high noon, it felt like twilight. You could lose your squad just by walking 10 feet to take a leak. And the Germans? They knew every inch of it. They had been building bunkers there for years. I remember the day we moved into the line. We were relieving the 28th Infantry Division. I'll never forget the look on those guys' faces as they walked past us, heading to the rear. They looked like ghosts. Their uniforms were shredded, caked in mud. Their eyes, they had that 1,000-yard stare. They didn't look at us. They looked through us. One guy, a corporal, just muttered, "Turn back, just turn back." We didn't turn back. We marched right into the gloom. My squad leader then wasn't Miller yet. It was a guy named Kowalski, big guy from Chicago, tough as nails, but he was superstitious. He wore a rosary around his neck and would touch it every time a shell landed. In the Huertgen, he was touching it every 5 seconds. The problem with the forest wasn't just the enemy soldiers, it was the trees themselves. The Germans had these fuses on their artillery shells, timed fuses. They wouldn't hit the ground and explode. They would hit the tops of the trees, 70, 80 feet up. The shell would detonate and it would shatter the tree. So you didn't just have shrapnel raining down on you. You had razor-sharp, jagged splinters of wood, some as big as a baseball bat, raining down at supersonic speeds. You couldn't dig a foxhole with a roof strong enough. You'd just curl up in the bottom of your hole, pull your knees to your chest, and pray that the wood didn't find you. We were tasked with taking a ridge, just a line on a map, Hill 400 or something like that. It didn't look like much on paper, just contour lines. But on the ground, it was a fortress. We started up the slope in the morning mist. The ground was slippery with pine needles and wet clay. We moved tree to tree. Silence. That was the worst part of the forest. The silence. The birds had long since fled. The only sound was the water dripping off the branches and the squelch of our boots. I was on point with a kid named Sal. Sal was 18. He lied about his age to get in. He wanted to be a hero. He was a good kid, always trying to give away his chocolate rations because he said they made his teeth hurt. We were moving up, eyes scanning the undergrowth. Suddenly, a crack, not a rifle shot, a snap, a tripwire. "Mine!" I screamed, diving flat. The explosion wasn't big, but it was close. It was a bouncing Betty, an S mine. It pops up to waist height and sprays ball bearings. I felt the heat of it wash over me. I checked myself. I was okay. Just mud in my teeth. I looked over at Sal. He was lying on his back, staring up at the canopy. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. "Sal?" I crawled over. A single ball bearing had caught him right in the throat. He couldn't speak. He was clawing at his neck, looking at me with panic. Pure animal panic. I tried to put pressure on it, but the blood, it was everywhere. It was slick and hot on my freezing hands. "Medic!" I yelled, but my voice sounded swallowed by the heavy air. "Medic!" Kowalski was there in a second, sliding into the mud next to me. He took one look and shook his head. He grabbed Sal's hand. "Look at me, Sal," Kowalski said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Look at me. You're going home, kid. You're going home." Sal's eyes started to glaze over. He squeezed Kowalski's hand, then went limp. Just like that. 18 years old. Gone for a hill that nobody in America had ever heard of. We didn't have time to mourn. The mine had alerted the Germans. A machine gun opened up from a bunker hidden in the roots of a massive oak tree up the ridge. The bullets chewed up the ground around us. We were pinned. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. It helps me know that Sal and boys like him aren't just statistics. We lay there in the mud for 4 hours. 4 hours of freezing rain, pinned down by a machine gun we couldn't see. You start to go crazy in that situation. You start counting the pine needles. You start making deals with God. If I get out of this, I'll never swear again. If I get out of this, I'll go to church every Sunday. Kowalski crawled over to me. "We gotta move, Lawson. We stay here. The mortars get us." "Move where?" I asked. "They got the angle. I'm gonna flank them," Kowalski said. He didn't look like a hero. He looked terrified. He was sweating despite the cold. "You and the rest of the guys lay down a base of fire. Keep their heads down. I'll crawl up the ravine on the right." "That's suicide, Sarge," I said. "Staying here is suicide," he snapped. On my signal. He stripped off his heavy gear, keeping just his Thompson submachine gun and a bag of grenades. He looked at me one last time. He touched his rosary. "Tell my wife I love her," he said. "It's a cliche in the movies. In real life, it's the hardest thing a man can say." "Tell her yourself," I said, trying to be tough. He gave a grim smile and rolled away into the brush. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The German gun kept firing bursts every time we twitched. I was firing my M1 Garand blindly at the oak tree, just trying to make noise. Bang, 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 ping, reload, do it again. My thumb was raw. Then, we heard it. The distinctive thump, thump, thump of a Thompson, then a scream, then the dull crump of a grenade. The German gun went silent. "Move up! Move up!" someone yelled. We scrambled up the hill, slipping, sliding, panting. We got to the bunker. It was a log and dirt dugout, perfectly camouflaged. Inside, 3 German soldiers were dead. We found Kowalski outside the bunker. He was sitting against a tree, holding his stomach. His face was gray. "Did we get him?" he whispered. "We got him, Sarge," I said, kneeling beside him. "You got him." He nodded, closed his eyes, and let out a long breath. He didn't open them again. We held that hill for 3 days. 3 days of counterattacks. 3 days of artillery tree bursts. We lost half the platoon for a piece of ground that had no strategic value other than it was higher than the ground next to it. The nights were the worst. In the Hurtgen, it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The Germans would infiltrate our lines. They would crawl up in the dark, silent as cats. Sometimes you'd hear a snap of a twig right next to your hole. You didn't know if it was a deer or a German with a knife. I remember one night I was on watch. My eyes were straining against the dark. I started hallucinating. I saw shapes moving that weren't there. Trees turned into men. Bushes turned into tanks. I heard a whisper. "Hey, Joe." German soldiers often called us Joe or Yank. I froze. It came from about 10 yards away. "Joe, have you got a cigarette?" It was absurd. A voice in the dark asking for a smoke. "Go to hell, Fritz," I whispered back, raising my rifle. "No hell," the voice said. "Here is hell. We are in it." He wasn't wrong. "Why you fight?" the voice asked. "War is lost. Go home. Come out with your hands up and I won't shoot," I said. A laugh. A dry, tired laugh. "No, I stay here. You stay there. We wait for morning. Maybe we die then." We sat there in the dark, two enemies separated by 30 feet of mud and darkness, talking about the absurdity of it. He told me, or yelled softly, that he was from Hamburg, that his house was gone, bombed. He had nothing to go back to. "You have home?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Pennsylvania." "Pennsylvania," he repeated. "Sounds nice. No trees?" "Lots of trees," I said. "Don't go to the trees," he said. "Trees are bad." At dawn, the mist lifted. I looked over to where the voice had come from. There was a body there, a German soldier slumped over a root. He had bled out during the night from a wound in his leg. He had spent his last hours talking to the man who was supposed to kill him. I went over to him. He was young, blonde hair, dirty face. I checked his pockets. No papers. Just a picture of a dog. A German shepherd. I took the picture. I don't know why. I carried it for a week before I lost it in a firefight. But I remember that dog. And I remember his voice. "Here is hell." We finally pulled out of the Hurtgen in December. We were exhausted, hollowed out. We looked like old men. I was 20, going on 50. We marched back to a rest area, thinking we were done for a while, thinking we'd get a hot meal, a shower, maybe sleep in a bed. But history had a different plan. The Germans weren't done. They were gathering their last strength for one massive gamble, a gamble that would hit us just as we were taking our boots off. They called it Operation Watch on the Rhine. We called it the Battle of the Bulge. We were sent to a quiet sector in the Ardennes, Luxembourg. It was supposed to be a vacation. Rolling hills, snowy fields, quiet villages. We were billeted in a barn. I remember the smell of the hay. It was the sweetest thing I'd ever smelled after the rot of the forest. We had a Christmas dinner early. Turkey, cranberry sauce. It came in cans, but it tasted like a Michelin star meal. We were relaxing, cleaning our weapons, writing letters. I wrote to my mom. I told her I was safe. I told her the hard fighting was over. I was a liar. On December 16th, the world exploded. It started with an artillery barrage that made the Hurtgen look like a firecracker. The sky turned red. The ground shook so hard the tiles fell off the roof of the barn. We grabbed our gear, stumbling out into the snow. "Tanks!" someone screamed. "Tiger tanks!" Out of the mist came these monsters. White-painted tanks, massive things, crushing everything in their path. And behind them, thousands of white-clad infantry. It was a tidal wave. We were overrun. There's no other word for it. We were scattered. The lines broke. Command and control fell apart. It was every man for himself. I ended up with a small group, me, Henderson, who I mentioned before, and a new sergeant named Riley. We were cut off behind enemy lines. The snow was knee-deep. It was freezing cold, colder than I had ever felt. The temperature dropped to 0, then below 0. We had no winter gear. We were wearing summer uniforms with field jackets. Our boots weren't insulated. We wrapped burlap sacks around our feet to keep the frostbite away. We spent 3 days hiding in the woods, moving only at night. We could hear the German columns moving on the roads, tanks, trucks, half-tracks. They were moving west toward Antwerp. They were winning. We were starving. We had no food. We ate snow. We chewed on pine bark. One night, we found a farmhouse. It looked abandoned. No smoke from the chimney. We approached it carefully. Riley kicked the door in. Inside it was freezing, but there was a cellar. We went down. There were potatoes, a bin full of raw, dirty potatoes. I have never eaten anything so good in my life. We ate them raw, dirt and all. "We gotta get back to our lines," Riley said, munching on a potato. "Where are our lines?" Henderson asked. "They could be in Paris by now." "Don't talk like that," Riley said. "The army doesn't break, it bends." We heard a vehicle pull up outside. Heavy engine, German. We froze. We heard boots on the floorboards above us. Dust drifted down from the ceiling planks. "Americans?" a voice shouted in English. "Come out! The war is over for you." They knew we were there. Tracks in the snow. Amateur mistake. Riley looked at us. He pulled the pin on a grenade. "I ain't going to a camp," he whispered. "Sarge, no," I hissed. "There's too many of them." "I ain't going," he repeated. Then, a burst of machine gun fire ripped through the floorboards. Splinters rained down. We scrambled into the corners of the cellar. "Last chance," the German yelled. "We have a Panzerfaust. We will bring the house down." I looked at Henderson. He was crying silently. I looked at Riley. He was holding that grenade, his knuckles white. "Sarge," I said, "put the pin back. We can't fight a tank with a grenade." Riley hesitated. Then slowly, painfully, he tried to put the pin back. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped it. The grenade was live in his hand. He looked at me. His eyes were wide. He didn't say a word. He just turned away from us toward the stairs and threw it up. It exploded in the stairwell. A scream from above. Smoke filled the cellar. "Go! Go!" Riley yelled. "Out the coal chute!" There was a small metal door in the wall where they shoveled coal in. We scrambled through it, squeezing out into the snow. We ran. We ran until our lungs burned. We heard shouting behind us, a few shots, but the confusion of the grenade blast gave us a head start. We didn't see Riley come out. We ran into the tree line and kept going. We walked for 2 days. My feet were numb blocks of ice. I couldn't feel my toes. I knew I had frostbite. I just hoped I wouldn't lose the feet. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. It helps keep the legacy of men like Riley alive. We finally found an American outpost near Bastogne. When we walked in, the sentry almost shot us. We looked like wild men, unshaven, filthy, wrapped in burlap. "Password?" the sentry yelled. I didn't know the password. It changed every day. "Mickey Mouse," I screamed. "Betty Grable, Coca-Cola." The sentry lowered his rifle. "Close enough," he said. "Get in here." They gave us hot coffee. It burned my tongue, but it was the best feeling in the world. A medic looked at my feet. "You're lucky, soldier," he said. "Another day and these would have been black. You'll keep them, but they're gonna hurt like hell when they thaw." He was right. Thawing out frostbite is a pain I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It feels like your feet are on fire. It feels like someone is driving nails into your toes. We were in Bastogne. And if you know your history, you know that Bastogne was about to become the center of the universe. We were surrounded. The 101st Airborne was there. The battered bastards of Bastogne. We were just stragglers, infantry guys who got swept up in their fight. They were tough guys, the paratroopers. They didn't have enough ammo, didn't have winter clothes, but they had attitude. "They've got us surrounded," one paratrooper told me, grinning like a maniac. The poor bastards. But the bravado wore thin when the shelling started. The Germans wanted that town. It was the crossroads. They pounded us day and night. I remember Christmas Eve in Bastogne. We were in a bombed-out church. The roof was gone, so the snow was falling right onto the pews. A chaplain was holding a service. "Silent night," we sang. "Silent night, holy night." Voices cracked. Grown men wept openly. We were thinking of home, of warm fireplaces, of trees with lights, not artillery fuses. I looked around that church. I saw men from every walk of life, farmers, factory workers, teachers, clerks, all of us freezing, hungry and scared. But there was something else there too, a bond. You hear people talk about band of brothers. It sounds like a line from a book, but it's real. When you're in a hole with a guy and you're sharing your last cigarette and you're both shaking with fear, you love that guy. You love him more than you love your own life. You die for him. And you know he'd die for you. That's what kept us going. Not patriotism, not hatred of the Germans, not the generals. It was the guy next to you. The sky cleared the day after Christmas. I'll never forget that sound, the hum of engines. We looked up. C-47 transport planes, hundreds of them, dropping supplies, red, blue, and yellow parachutes drifting down against the blue sky. It was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. And then, the P-47 Thunderbolts came down, the fighter bombers. They dove on the German tanks surrounding the city. We stood up and cheered. We waved our helmets. We screamed until our throats were raw. Patton had broken through from the south. The siege was broken. We survived. But we were changed. After the Bulge, we moved into Germany. That's when the Rhine crossing happened, the story I told you earlier. But I wanted to tell you about the forest and the Bulge first, because that's where the steel was tempered. That's where we lost our innocence completely. We saw things in Germany that I still have nightmares about, not just the camps, but the fanaticism. We were in a town called Aschaffenburg. The local commander refused to surrender. He hung white flags from the windows to lure us in, then opened fire. We had to level the place, house by house. I remember kicking in a door of an apartment. There was a woman there, holding a baby. She wasn't armed. She was just terrified. "Wasser," she said. "Water." Her baby was crying. A thin, reedy cry. I gave her my canteen. She drank it so fast she choked. Then she tried to give it to the baby. I looked at her. She looked like my sister. She looked like any girl from back home. She wasn't a Nazi monster. She was just a mother caught in the crossfire. I gave her a D-ration bar, chocolate. She looked at it like it was gold. "Danke," she whispered. "Stay down," I told her. "Stay away from the windows." As I walked out, I saw a poster on the wall. A picture of Hitler. I tore it down. I crumpled it up and threw it on the floor. It felt like a small victory. But outside, the city was burning. The war ended in May. We were in Czechoslovakia by then. We met the Russians. That was a strange experience. They were wild. They drank vodka like water. They danced on the hoods of their trucks. They hugged us and kissed us. But you could see the tension even then. We were allies, but we were from different worlds. I traded a wristwatch for a Russian shapka, those fur hats. I still have it. It smells like mothballs now. When I got on the boat to come home, I stood on the deck and watched the coast of Europe fade away. I thought I was leaving the war behind. I thought I could just take off the uniform and be Henry Lawson, civilian. But you don't leave it behind. You carry it. You carry the weight of the guys who didn't come back. You carry the silence of the forest. You carry the cold of the bulge. I tried to talk to my wife about it when I first got back. She tried to listen. She really did. But she couldn't understand. How do you explain the smell of a burning tank? How do you explain the sound a bullet makes when it hits flesh? You can't. So I stopped talking. I went to work. I raised my kids. I went to the VFW hall and drank cheap beer with the other guys. We didn't talk about the war much there either. We just nodded at each other. We knew that was enough. But now I'm 92. The guys at the VFW are mostly gone now. It's getting lonely. And I realize that if I don't tell these stories, they die with me. That map I told you about? The one with the grease pencil line? It's framed now. My grandson framed it for me. He likes history. He asks me questions. "Grandpa, was it like the video games?" I tell him no. In the video games, you get an extra life. In the video games, you don't smell the dead. In the video games, you don't freeze. I want you to know that freedom isn't free. It's a bumper sticker slogan now, but it's the truth. It's paid for in blood and terror and lost youth. It's paid for by boys like Sal and Kowalski and Riley. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. It helps me pass the torch to you. I have one more story I want to share with you. A story about what happened after the shooting stopped. About the occupation. About trying to build a peace on top of a graveyard. About a girl I met in Munich and a decision I made that I've regretted for 70 years. But that's a story for the next time. This is Henry Lawson. Thank you for listening. Keep your powder dry.